You know, there comes a moment in everyone's life when you realize that all the noise, all the chatter, all the endless talking and explaining and defending yourself just doesn't matter anymore. There comes a point where you understand that the most powerful thing you can possibly do is to simply be quiet. To stop trying to prove yourself to everyone around you. To stop needing validation from people who don't even understand your path. And in that silence, in that beautiful sacred silence, something extraordinary happens. You begin to hear the voice that matters most, the voice of the divine, the voice of God speaking directly to your soul. Right now, at this very moment, you have a choice. You can continue living the way you've been living, constantly seeking approval, constantly trying to make everyone understand your decisions, constantly feeling like you need to explain yourself to people who will never truly get it anyway. Or you can make a different choice. You can choose to focus on God, to humble yourself before the infinite intelligence that created you, and to stay silent in the face of criticism, judgment, and misunderstanding. This isn't about being weak. This is about being so strong, so centered, so connected to your source that nothing anyone says or does can shake you from your foundation. Think about this for a moment. When you look at the truly great spiritual teachers, the ones who changed the world, what did they have in common? They didn't spend their time arguing with everyone who disagreed with them. They didn't waste their energy trying to convince the skeptics. They simply lived their truth. They stayed connected to God. They remained humble, and they knew when to speak and when to be silent. Jesus didn't defend himself at his trial. Buddha didn't argue with those who mocked him. These beings understood something profound that most people never grasp. They understood that your connection to the divine is not something you need to defend. It's something you simply live. Now, I want you to really understand what it means to focus on God. This isn't about religion, though if religion helps you connect to the divine, that's beautiful. This is about recognizing that there is an infinite intelligence, a creative force, a loving presence that is always available to you. Always. Right now, as you hear these words, that presence is with you. It's not separate from you. It's not somewhere out there in the sky judging you. It's within you. It's the very essence of who you are. When you focus on God, you're not focusing on some distant deity. You're focusing on the highest aspect of yourself. You're aligning yourself with the creative force that brings worlds into being. And here's what happens when you truly focus on God. Everything changes. Your priorities shift. The things that used to upset you don't bother you anymore. The opinions of others lose their power over you. You stop being controlled by fear because you realize that if God is with you, if God is within you, then what is there to fear? You begin to see that every challenge, every obstacle, every person who seems to be working against you is actually part of your spiritual growth. It's all happening for you, not to you. When you focus on God, you step out of victim consciousness and into creator consciousness. But focusing on God requires something from you. It requires humility. And let me tell you, humility is one of the most misunderstood concepts in our world today. People think humility means making yourself small. They think it means denying your greatness. They think it means putting yourself down. That's not humility. That's false modesty, and it doesn't serve anyone. True humility is recognizing that your greatness doesn't come from you alone. It comes from your connection to something far greater than your individual self. True humility is understanding that you are a channel, an instrument, a vessel through which the divine works. When you humble yourself, you're not saying you're worthless. You're saying you're willing to get your ego out of the way so that something bigger can flow through you. You're saying you don't need to take all the credit. You're saying you don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You're saying you're willing to learn, to grow, to admit when you're wrong, to change your mind when new information comes along. This is strength, not weakness. It takes tremendous courage to humble yourself in a world that constantly tells you to promote yourself, to brand yourself, to make sure everyone knows how amazing you are. Here's the beautiful paradox. The more you humble yourself, the more you actually rise. The more you let go of needing to be right, the more wisdom flows to you. The more you stop trying to control everything, the more things fall into place. The more you surrender to God, to the divine flow of life, the more powerful you become. But it's not the kind of power the world understands. It's not the power of domination or control. It's the power of presence. It's the power of peace. It's the power of knowing who you are at the deepest level. And then there's silence. Oh, the power of silence. We live in a world that is so noisy. Everyone is talking. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone wants to be heard. Social media has given everyone a platform, and now we're drowning in a sea of voices, most of them saying absolutely nothing of value. And in the midst of all this noise, the wisest thing you can do is to be quiet, to stop adding to the chaos, to stop defending yourself against every criticism, to stop trying to make everyone understand you. You see, when you're truly connected to God, when you're truly humble, you don't need to explain yourself to everyone. You don't need to defend your choices. You don't need to convince anyone that you're on the right path. You simply walk your path with confidence and let your life be the evidence. You let your peace be the proof. You let your joy be the testimony. Words are cheap. Anyone can say anything. But the way you live, the energy you carry, the light that shines through you, that's what really matters. Staying silent doesn't mean you never speak. It means you choose your words carefully. It means you don't react to every provocation. It means you don't engage in arguments that will lead nowhere. It means you save your energy for what truly matters. There are people in your life right now who will never understand your spiritual path. They'll think you're crazy. They'll think you're deluded. They'll try to pull you back down to their level of consciousness. And you know what? That's okay. You don't need their approval. You don't need their understanding. You need to stay true to yourself and to God. Let me tell you something about criticism and judgment. When someone criticizes you, when someone judges you, it's rarely about you. It's about them. It's about their own fears, their own insecurities, their own limited way of seeing the world. When you understand this, you stop taking things personally. You realize that someone else's opinion of you is none of your business. Your business is to stay focused on God, to remain humble, and to be silent in the face of ignorance. There's a story I love about a wise teacher who was constantly being criticized by people in his village. They said he was lazy because he meditated all day. They said he was foolish because he gave away everything he had. They said he was wasting his life. And do you know what he did? He smiled. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He simply continued doing what he knew was right. And eventually people began to notice something. This teacher had a peace about him that they didn't have. He had a joy that they couldn't find. He had a wisdom that they desperately needed. And slowly, one by one, they came to him to learn. Not because he convinced them with words, but because he showed them with his life. This is the path I'm talking about. This is the way of focusing on God, humbling yourself, and staying silent. It's not passive. It's not weak. It's the most powerful way to live because it comes from a place of complete inner strength. When you don't need to prove anything to anyone, you're free. When you don't need to defend your every action, you're at peace. When you don't need to explain yourself constantly, you have so much more energy for the things that truly matter. Now let's talk about what it really means to focus on God in practical terms. How do you do this in your daily life? It starts in the morning, the moment you wake up. Before you check your phone, before you start thinking about all the things you need to do, before you let the world rush in, you take a few moments to connect. You might pray. You might meditate. You might simply sit in silence and feel the presence of the divine within you. You set your intention for the day. You remind yourself that you're not doing life alone, that there's an infinite intelligence guiding you, supporting you, loving you. Throughout your day, you keep coming back to this connection. When you're faced with a difficult decision, you pause and ask for guidance. When you're feeling overwhelmed, you take a breath and remember that you're being held by something far greater than your problems. When someone says something hurtful, you step back and refuse to react from your wounded ego. Instead, you respond from your higher self, from your connection to God. This is what it means to walk through life with spiritual awareness. And here's what's beautiful about this practice. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. In the beginning, you might forget. You might get caught up in drama. You might react in old ways. That's okay. This is a practice, not a perfection. Every time you remember to focus on God, every time you choose humility over ego, every time you stay silent instead of reacting, you're strengthening that spiritual muscle. You're rewiring your brain. You're shifting your consciousness. And gradually, this way of being becomes natural. It becomes who you are. Let's talk about humility in a deeper way. When you humble yourself before God, you're acknowledging that you don't have all the answers. You're admitting that your perspective is limited. You're opening yourself up to being taught. taught, to being guided, to being transformed. And this is where miracles happen. When you think you know everything, you close yourself off to new possibilities. When you think you have it all figured out, you stop growing. But when you approach life with humility, with a beginner's mind, with a willingness to be surprised, life becomes an adventure. God can work through you in ways you never imagined. I've seen this in my own life countless times. The moments when I thought I knew exactly how things should go, those were usually the moments when I struggled the most. But the moments when I said, God, I don't know what to do here. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to follow your guidance. I'm going to let go of my need to control this situation. Those were the moments when everything flowed. Those were the moments when solutions appeared out of nowhere. Those were the moments when I experienced what people call miracles, but what I call the natural result of aligning with the divine flow. Humility also means being okay with not being understood. There will be people who think you're strange because you meditate. There will be people who think you're irresponsible because you trust God instead of worrying constantly. There will be people who think you're naive because you choose love over fear. Let them think what they want. You're not living for their approval. You're living for truth. You're living for love. You're living for God. And that requires a level of courage that most people don't have. It requires the courage to be different, to go against the crowd, to trust your inner guidance even when everyone else thinks you're wrong. Now, about staying silent, this is perhaps the most challenging part for many people. We've been conditioned to defend ourselves, to explain ourselves, to make sure everyone knows our side of the story. We've been taught that if we don't speak up, we'll be walked all over. We've been told that silence means weakness, but I'm here to tell you that silence is power. The right kind of silence, spiritual silence, conscious silence, is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. When you stay silent in the face of criticism, you're not allowing the critic to control your energy. You're not giving away your power. You're keeping your peace intact. When you stay silent instead of arguing, you're refusing to engage in the ego battle that drains both people involved. You're choosing to stay in your higher consciousness while the other person is in their lower consciousness. And eventually, they'll either rise to meet you there, or they'll move on to find someone else to argue with. Silence also allows you to hear God. You can't hear the still small voice within if you're constantly talking, constantly defending, constantly engaged in mental chatter. Silence creates space, space for wisdom to emerge, space for inspiration to flow, space for healing to occur. When you practice silence, you're not running away from problems. You're creating the internal environment where solutions can appear. There's a difference between silence and suppression, though. I'm not telling you to suppress your feelings or to pretend everything is okay when it's not. I'm talking about conscious silence. Silence that comes from strength, not fear. Silence that comes from knowing when to speak and when not to. Silence that comes from recognizing that some battles aren't worth fighting because they keep you stuck in lower consciousness. Here's a practice I want you to try. For the next week, before you respond to any criticism, before you defend yourself, before you explain your actions, pause. Take 3 deep breaths. Connect with God. Ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Does this person really want to understand, or do they just want to be right? Will engaging in this conversation bring me closer to my highest self, or will it pull me down? Most of the time, you'll realize that silence is the best response. Not because you don't have a good answer, but because you're choosing to protect your peace. And when you do choose to speak, speak from that connected place. Speak from love, not from ego. Speak to uplift, not to defeat. Speak to share your truth, not to prove someone else wrong. Words that come from a place of connection to God have power. They land differently. They touch hearts. They change minds. But words that come from ego, from defensiveness, from the need to be right, those words create more conflict, more separation, more pain. Let me share something with you about the ego. The ego is that part of you that believes you're separate from God, separate from others, separate from the universe. The ego believes it has to fight for everything, defend everything, control everything. The ego is terrified of being wrong, of looking foolish, of being rejected. And so the ego talks constantly. It explains, it justifies, it defends. The ego can never be at peace because it's always in battle mode. But when you focus on God, when you humble yourself, when you practice silence, you're not operating from ego. You're operating from your true self, your higher self, your God self. This part of you knows it's connected to everything. This part of you knows it's loved unconditionally. This part of you knows it has nothing to prove. And from this place, You can respond to life with grace, with wisdom, with compassion. I want you to think about the people in your life who inspire you the most, the ones who seem to have a deep peace about them, the ones who don't get rattled easily, the ones who seem to know something that others don't. What do they have in common? They're not the loudest people in the room. They're not constantly defending themselves. They're not always trying to prove how spiritual or smart or successful they are. They simply are. They're grounded, they're centered, they're connected. And that connection radiates from them without them having to say a word. This is what's available to you. This is what happens when you make the commitment to focus on God, to humble yourself, and to stay silent. You become a presence. You become a light. You become an example of what's possible when you align with the divine. And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to be willing. Willing to let go of ego. Willing to trust. Willing to be quiet when your old programming tells you to defend yourself. There's a prayer I love, and it goes something like this. God, please help me to see this situation differently. Help me to respond from love instead of fear. Help me to remember who I really am. This simple prayer can transform any moment. When you're about to engage in an argument, pray this. When you're feeling defensive, pray this. When you're hurt and want to hurt back, pray this. It shifts you from ego consciousness to God consciousness in an instant. And here's what I want you to understand. When you live this way, when you focus on God, when you humble yourself, when you stay silent in the face of ignorance, you're not just changing your own life, you're changing the world, you're raising the collective consciousness, you're showing others a different way to live, you're being the light that helps guide others out of darkness. You might never know the full impact of your presence, of your peace, of your example, but trust me, it's profound. Think about all the energy you've wasted over the years trying to convince people who don't want to be convinced. Think about all the arguments you've had that changed nothing except making everyone feel worse. Think about all the times you've defended yourself to people who were never going to understand you anyway. What if you could have all that energy back? What if you could redirect it toward your purpose, toward your growth, toward your connection with God? That's what happens when you stop engaging in unnecessary battles. I'm not saying you should never stand up for yourself. There are times when speaking up is necessary. There are times when silence would be complicity, but those times are rarer than you think. Most of the time, the most powerful thing you can do is to simply walk away, to stay in your peace, to refuse to be drawn into drama. When you do this, you're not being weak, you're being wise, you're being spiritual, you're being like the masters who came before you. Let's talk about trust for a moment, because all of this, focusing on God, humbling yourself, staying silent, it all requires trust. You have to trust that God has your back. You have to trust that you don't need to control every outcome. You have to trust that things are working out even when you can't see how. This kind of trust doesn't come easily in our world. We've been taught to trust only what we can see, only what we can control, only what makes logical sense. But spiritual trust goes beyond logic. It's a knowing that comes from somewhere deeper. How do you develop this trust? You start small. You practice in low-stakes situations. When something small goes wrong, instead of panicking, you pause and say, okay, God, I trust there's something good coming from this. I trust you're guiding me. And then you watch what happens. You'll start to notice that things do work out. You'll start to see the synchronicities. You'll start to experience the support of the universe. And gradually, your trust grows, until eventually you can face even the biggest challenges with a sense of peace because you know you're not alone. There's something else I want to address, and that's the fear of being taken advantage of. People often ask me, if I stay silent, if I don't defend myself, won't people walk all over me? And my answer is this: when you're truly connected to God, when you're operating from your highest self, you have boundaries. You have discernment. You know when to engage and when to walk away. You don't allow yourself to be abused. But you also don't waste your energy on people who are stuck in low consciousness. You set your boundaries from a place of love and peace, not from a place of anger and defensiveness. There's a huge difference between being a doormat and being spiritually mature. A doormat allows others to treat them badly because they don't value themselves. A spiritually mature person knows their worth, knows their connection to God, and simply doesn't engage with people who aren't ready to meet them at that level. They don't need to fight. They don't need to prove anything. They simply choose where to put their energy. As you practice this way of living, focusing on God, humbling yourself, staying silent, you'll notice that your relationships change. Some people will fall away. These are usually the people who were only in your life because you were operating at their level of consciousness. And that's okay. Let them go with love. New people will come into your life. People who resonate with the new you. People who are are also on a spiritual path, people who understand what it means to live from a place of connection to the divine. These are your true tribe, your soul family. You'll also notice that your tolerance for drama decreases dramatically. Things that used to pull you in no longer interest you. Gossip bores you. Arguments seem pointless. Other people's opinions of you don't affect you the way they used to. This isn't because you've become cold or uncaring, it's because you've become clear. You've prioritized your connection to God above everything else, and that changes everything. Let me tell you about the peace that comes from this way of living. It's not the peace of having no problems. It's not the peace of having everything go your way. It's the peace of knowing that no matter what happens, you're okay, you're held, you're loved, you're guided. It's the peace that passes understanding, as the scripture says. It's a peace that people can feel when they're around you. It's a peace that's contagious, that inspires others to find their own connection to God. This peace is what people are really searching for when they chase money, success, relationships, approval. They think those external things will give them peace, but they won't. Only connection to God gives you true peace. Only humility gives you true peace. Only the wisdom to stay silent when silence is called for gives you true peace. Everything else is temporary. Everything else is conditional. But the peace that comes from aligning with the divine, that's eternal. I want to leave you with this thought. Your life is happening right now. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, but right now, in this moment. And in this moment, you have a choice. You can continue living from ego, from fear, from the need to be right and to have everyone approve of you, or you can choose to focus on God, to humble yourself, and to stay silent in the face of the world's noise. One path leads to endless struggle. The other path leads to peace, to joy, to fulfillment, to the life you were meant to live. You are not here by accident. You are here for a purpose, and that purpose becomes clear when you quiet down enough to hear it. When you stop trying to force life to go your way and start flowing with the divine plan, when you let go of your need to control and trust that you're being guided. This is the spiritual path. This is what it means to truly live. Not to exist, not to survive, not to get through the days, but to truly live with purpose, with passion, with presence, with peace. So I invite you, starting right now, to make this commitment. Commit to focusing on God every single day. Commit to approaching life with humility. Commit to staying silent when your ego wants to defend and explain and prove. This won't be easy. Your old patterns will try to pull you back. People around you might not understand the change they see in you, but stay the course. Keep coming back to these principles. Keep choosing the higher path. And remember, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing. Willing to try, willing to grow, willing to change. God doesn't expect perfection from you. God just wants your willingness, your openness, your heart. The rest will unfold naturally. The more you practice focusing on God, the more automatic it becomes. The more you practice humility, the more natural it feels. The more you practice conscious silence, the more you realize its power. Your life is a gift. Every moment is an opportunity to align with the divine. Every challenge is an invitation to deepen your faith. Every person who crosses your path is a teacher, showing you where you still need to grow, where you still need to let go, where you still need to trust more. This is the beautiful complexity of human life. We're here to learn to evolve, to remember who we really are. And who are you really? You are not your ego, you are not your past, you are not your mistakes, you are not your achievements. You are a divine being having a human experience. You are a piece of God experiencing life through these eyes, through this body, through this personality. When you remember this, when you really get this at the core level, everything changes. You stop taking life so seriously. You stop needing things to be a certain way. You stop fighting against what is and start flowing with what's becoming. This is freedom. This is what every spiritual teacher throughout history has been trying to point us toward. Not rules and regulations, not do's and don'ts, but the simple, profound truth that you are connected to something infinite, something loving, something that wants your highest good. And all you have to do is tune in. Focus on God. Humble yourself. Stay silent. These three practices will transform your life in ways you can't even comprehend right now. So take a deep breath. Feel the life force moving through you. Know that in this very moment, you are exactly where you need to be. Everything that has happened in your life has brought you to this point. Every joy, every pain, every success, every failure, it's all been preparing you for this moment of awakening, this moment of choice, this moment when you decide to live differently. You have everything you need within you right now. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to achieve anything more. You just need to remember. Remember your connection. Remember your divinity. Remember your purpose. And then live live from that place. Live from connection, not separation. Live from love, not fear. Live from trust, not control. This is the way, this is the path. This is your invitation to a life beyond anything you've known before. Will you accept it?